Hello everyone and welcome to our 2024 R1 feature review for platform features. Today, myself, Dmitry Naumov, and my colleague Varthini Bhatkaran are going to present the following topics. First, Varthini will cover the changes to platform API, such as support of a strongly typed facade for the pxCache object, support for targeted overrides of the pxGraphPersist method, and the new pxBQL table class that you need to use for data access classes declaration. Then she'll cover changes to web services, such as support of JSON Web Token authorization and retrieval of localized reports. After that, I will cover changes to access rights, restoration of snapshots with custom columns, conversion of Acumatica forms to the modern UI, changes to workflow, and usage of generic inquiries in another generic inquiries. So let's start. Parthini, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Now, let's move on to the first topic in our agenda that is support for a strongly typed facade for the PX cache object. So, what we mean by a strongly typed facade? An example of this is shown where a strongly typed cache object of the SO order DAC is utilized. So, before we move on to the example, let's see what are the advantages of using a strongly typed methodology. First is type safety, improved productivity. It also facilitates refactoring, improved readability and documentation, and better integration. Please refer to the release notes for the detailed usage scenarios and syntaxes as shown here. Now let's see an example. In order to insert a DAC object, we have to rely on explicit conversions and the type of the return object to ensure type safety. Also, we have to check whether the object returned is of the type we intended. Now, this can be validated during compilation itself using the strongly typed methodology. By using the strongly typed object, we can ensure that both the objects sent and returned are of the appropriate type at compilation itself. Similarly, while iterating through inserted DAC records, we can validate the object at compilation stage itself. Please note that the weakly typed method is also supported in addition to this. Now let's move on to the second topic, that is support for targeted overrides of the pxgraph.persist method. Persist method is overridden in multiple scenarios, and by providing targeted overrides of the persist method, developers will have more granular control of the code. Now, let's see the list of the targeted overrides available. What are the methods? First is pre-persist, next perform persist, pre-commit, and then post-commit. Pre-persist, as seen from the prefix, allows to add logic before the persisting logic. Perform persist method allows to change the order and composition of the cache object within the persisting logic. Pre-commit allows to inject logic before the transaction is closed. And lastly, post-commit allows logic to be added after the persisting logic. More details on this with code-based examples and syntax can be found on the release notes. Now let's see what are the advantages. By using these methods, developers will be able to inject logic without affecting the existing functionality. This makes the code less error prone. So by using targeted overrides, we'll be able to have more granular control and also reduce errors. Now let's move on to the third topic, that is introduction of the PXBQL table class. In 2024 R1, the DAC extensions can be stored within the instance of the corresponding DAC classes. In comparison, prior to 2024 R1, DAC extensions were stored in one place in the memory. Starting from 2024 R1, DAC classes, all data access classes, should be extended from the PXBQL table in addition to the IBQL table as shown here. Now let's see why the PXBQL table is needed. It improves memory usage by reducing the load on garbage collectors and other features. Next, it also reduces issues related to concurrency and data consistency. This is especially in long-running user sessions. So important note here is developers must update all their existing DAG declarations by extending from the PXBQL table class as shown in the sample previously. Now let's move on to the second section related to web services. And the first topic here is support for JWT bearer tokens for client authentication. Previously, with OAuth 2.0 or OpenID authorizations, only shared keys were available. Now in 2024 R1, support for JSON Web Token or JWT bearer tokens can be utilized for client authentication. The major advantage is private secret key is stored only in the client application and Acumatica holds only to the public key. This improves security. More details on this JWT token can be found on the Wikipedia page. And please also refer to the release notes on how to utilize this JWT bearer tokens using the connected application screen. Now let's move on to the last topic in our web services section, that is retrieval of localized reports through the REST API. In 2023 R2, we introduced the ability to retrieve a report through REST API. This feature is now enhanced, and in 2024 R1, we can also retrieve localized reports. That is, you can retrieve reports in other languages specified in the system. Now let's see how to do this. To retrieve a report in a different language, the header, uh, the accept language header should be set to the language needed. For example, here we have set the accept language header to French. Now we'll be able to retrieve the cache account summary report by making a post call to the entity as shown here, along with the accept language header. This post call will return a response with the location header with the URL that allows us to download the report. This is similar to how we download any attachment using REST API in Acumatica. So this way, we'll be able to download reports in localized reports through REST API. Now, there are two other header fields which can also be utilized. These details are found on the release notes. With that, let me hand off to Dimitri for the last section in our agenda.
Thank you, Vartini. Let's now review the other improvements that we've made in 2024 R1. First of all, let's talk about changes to access rights. Previously, in 23 R2 and older versions of Acumatica ERP, when you create a new form, the default access rights set to this form are not set, which means that the form by default is visible to all the users. However, if you change one of the roles to have explicit access, then all the not set ones will be considered as revoked for the other roles. So that was really not intuitive, and also this was a security risk because sometimes you do not want the new forms to be available for everyone right away. So in 24 R1 we have changed that behavior. When you create a new form, the default access right for that form is set to revoked for all user roles. And if you create a form from any of the screens that provide a wizard for that, let's say from generic inquiries or dashboards, when you want to expose those forms to user interface, the system will explicitly ask you to provide the access rights to that form. Let's take a closer look at the generic inquiries, for example. So here on the left in 2023 R2, you can see that on generic inquiries form, we previously had a checkbox expose to UI. And whenever you click that checkbox, the form is exposed to UI. In 24R1, it has been reworked, and now there is no checkbox anymore. Instead, there is a button publish to UI. So when you click that button, the system will ask you a couple of standard things to provide. For instance, where to place that form in the sitemap. And it will also allow you to specify the access rights for that new form. So for instance, you can set to granted for all roles, which means that it will be visible for everyone. You can also set it to revoked for all roles, which means it will not be visible to anyone. And the most useful option, most likely, is copy access rights from existing screen, which allows you to pretty much copy all that you have set up for some other screen to your newly exposed generic inquiry, which is very useful because most of the time it will follow some existing rules. Some other information on that. When you upgrade an existing Acumatica instance from older version to 24R1, what will happen to the forms that previously had not set access rights? If those forms had not set access rights for all user roles, these access rights will be converted to granted for all user roles. So the existing system behavior will be preserved. However, if at least one role had any other access right set, let's say delete or insert or edit or view or revoked, then all the access rights that are not set will be converted to revoked during the upgrade. And the ones that were set explicitly will stay as is. Some other details about that is for new user roles, whenever you create a new user role now in 24R1, it will have revoked access rights for all existing system screens. And whenever you create a new sitemap node directly on the sitemap page, it will also have revoked access rights for all existing user roles. Whenever you publish a customization package with access rights, it may do several things, and those things are defined by what you set as merge rule in the customization package. There are 4 available merge rules. First one is grant all, which means that on publishing, the customization package sets the access rights to granted for all user roles for a specific screen. Revoke all is the opposite. On publishing of a customization package, it sets access rights to revoked for all user roles in that instance. Then we have apply and reset, which means that when a customization package is published, it will set revoked access rights for all the roles that are not specifically included in the customization package. And for the ones that are explicitly included in the customization package, it will set whatever is included in the package. And apply and keep, which is the default option, will apply the access rights that are explicitly set from the customization package, and it will keep everything else unchanged for the roles that are not included in the customization package. So this was it about access rights. You can find more about that in the developer release notes. Let's now talk about restoration of snapshots with custom columns. In previous versions, when you wanted to restore a snapshot that was more than 1 gigabyte, you had an option to do it through the Acumatica installation wizard. However, that option had one significant flaw, which is it was not restoring any custom columns. So that means that you can restore bigger snapshots, bigger than 1 gigabyte, but only if those are not containing any custom columns, any custom fields, because those will be lost during the restoration process. That has been fixed, and in 24R1, finally, we can restore a bigger snapshots via Acumatica installation wizard with custom data included in that snapshot. The columns need to have USR prefix for it to work. The next change that I'd like to show is conversion of Acumatica screens from old UI to new UI. Before that, let's take a look on how to switch the screens that are already converted. First of all, you will need to add the setting that allows changing the UI to the web config. You can do it in two ways. Either you can directly edit a web config of a site by adding the key enable sitemap switch UI, or you can do it when you deploy an Acumatica instance using the deployment wizard, as you can see on the screenshot here. Next, when you've enabled the UI change for the site, you can go to a sitemap and you can change UI for any screen that has both already implemented. Or at the same time, you can go to any specific screen and click Tools, switch to Modern UI, which will convert that screen to the Modern UI if it already has the implementation. Just a note here, the Modern UI is still in preview stage, so it is not for production use. But you can already take a look at the new UI and see what it looks like. If there is a screen that is not yet converted to the new UI, so some built-in screens are not yet converted, or you may have a custom screen that you've created and you would like to convert it to the new UI, you can also do it in automatic mode. For that, first of all, you enable the sitemap switch as shown on the previous slide, and then you go to the screen, you go to customization, and you click convert to modern UI. Just a note, for that you will need the customizer role, and it is recommended to have all the features that may hide some parts of the screen to be enabled for that site. So when you've clicked the convert to modern UI, Acumatica tries to automatically convert the existing ASPX into TypeScript plus HTML. So from old UI to new UI. So you click that button, you get the zip archive back containing the TypeScript files and HTML file. You take those, you put those into the frontend sources folder of the site. Here you have the full path specified. And after that, you will need to build the front-end sources. You can do that by running npm run get modules command and then npm run build. If everything was successful, your screen now has the modern UI counterpart. So you can use tools, switch to modern UI button to convert it to the new look. It is not 100% ideal, so you may want to change things there, but it's a good start for you to start migrating your screens to the new UI. The next item in our agenda is changes to workflow. And for workflow, we've implemented a couple of changes. One of them is support of action sequences. So now in 24R1, what you can do, you can chain the actions in workflow. So when you trigger one action, it will trigger a sequence of other actions. You can even add conditions that tell you which action to execute in the chain next. If an action that you'd like to add to the action sequence has a dialog box that requires you to enter some data in it, let's say whenever you reject a time card, it may ask you to provide a reason for rejection. You can also specify the default value to put in that dialog box. So your sequence of actions will continue executing even if it receives that pop-up. So it will properly work with the pop-up, put the default value in it, and continue the execution. And when you run the sequence of actions, you will see a pop-up that will show which actions are done and which actions are trying to execute next. Similar to what you see when you click quick process on a sales order. The next topic that we have is usage of generic inquiries in other generic inquiries. Now, in generic inquiries, besides the data access classes that were there before, you can also select another generic inquiry as a data source. It is very useful when you need a subselect in your data selection. As you can see here on the screenshot, in the data source selector, you now have additional tab, generic inquiries, that will show other generic inquiries that you can add to this one as a data source. Some additional details on that. First of all, when you use a generic inquiry inside another generic inquiry, the access rights will be checked only for the top level inquiry. It is by design. And also, currently business events do not trigger on the GIs that include other GIs. It is going to be fixed at some point, but for now, please be careful. Do not use it in business events. There are some other smaller issues that are going to be gradually fixed. You can find the full list in developer release notes. That's going to be it for today. Of course, there are many more changes. We cannot cover everything in such a short time. If you are interested in details about the changes that we've covered, or you'd like to see the full list, please feel free to go to the community website or builds.acumatica.com and download the full developer release notes. Thank you for your attention, and now we are ready to answer your questions.